We're just waiting for her to, oh, there we go. Yo.
Yo.
What's good? What's good? What's good?
What's up? So you said you haven't been on live in a while. When was the last time?
I haven't. For like my followers, they know that like I used to actively do that. And then I kind of just stopped just to have like a moment of just solitude and thinking, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes like we focus on just being the output and talking and talking and talking. But sometimes, for me in particular, to come up with some of the best ideas, I need to step outside and like really just like get some new messages and give it to the people. So, I mean, this is part of it, you know, just being on live with you. What about you? When's the last time you live streamed? You live streamed yesterday?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of I've been doing a lot of lives, particularly this week because I'm on the virtual speaking tour. But other than that, I don't really use it that much, but it is a really good tool. I remember I was really heavy on Periscope when it first came out. And I really liked the feature, but yeah.
Now, one thing I really love about your messaging is you refer to all these social medias as tools, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, like I remember being in school when I was in elementary and first learning what a tool meant, and it's something that can be either used for the greater good or, you know, bad. And so I love that analogy and that truth behind even referring to whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, as a tool. I think that's so like profound.
Yeah, well, I think it's also really important that we comprehend social media as they're all different ways of doing one thing, which is trying to communicate. And some of them do it really well, and some of them kind of don't. And I like to kind of define social media as what it really is, which is something way beyond just Instagram or Twitter. It's a medium for people to socialize. And I think that I'm really excited to see how we're going to innovate better quality social media. Because I feel like what we have now is cool, but I'm like ready for the next stuff. And I don't mean just like TikTok. I mean stuff that's even more innovative than that. Because TikTok is still kind of based on stuff.
Yeah, or what was it? Talk Tick. You saw the new Lil Yachty Drake. You know, he's like, what's that new social media? That Talk Tick? Something like that. You know? But no, I'm super excited for this. And, you know, specifically because we're working on so many things. This period, I didn't plan on doing any form of live streaming, like showing my face of any space to talk about anything, because even though like I'm so thankful of the gifts that God and the universe have given me, I felt like I wasn't qualified to have an opinion in this time period right now, because there's like actual doctors, there's actually people saving people's lives. They're the people that people should be live streaming on and stuff. So like I was like, awesome, I don't want to do it. But then even talking to you, you know, let me, and for those that might not know, like we you know, we've known each other for quite some time now, and I think people might not understand that like we know each other outside of just this. This is not like our first interaction. So I think we should like let people know how we actually met, right?
Yes, we should. Well, it was super auspicious because I had just touched down in LA because I was meeting up with Snap, and I think we messaged each other on Instagram, and I was like, "Are you in LA?" And you said, "Yeah," and I was like, "I'm here." And then we met up, and then I remember we hung out at your house, and we were just like looking through books and talking about like both of our experiences in technology, being who we are. And it was such a surreal experience because I'm like, who is this person? Where did this person come from? And you had all these really dope like art books, just like
the infamous book collection.
So and I think that it was just really refreshing to find somebody who is also young, also Black, also like super involved in, I don't want to just say the tech space, but the intersection of tech and culture, because that's really like, I think that there's a whole tech world, but I still think that the merging of tech and culture is kind of, you know, formulating now, or, you know, I guess being put on the forefront in different ways. And that's what I'm really excited about. So that was how we met. And that was like almost a year ago now?
Yeah, that was like almost a year ago. I loved how we, you know, have been in the space. And one thing that like really again, I don't be like talking about no one on social media, like, you know, because not saying that I don't think there's not creatives out here that are like
right.
making an impact, but I just thought like your messaging was so necessary, even from a UX standpoint. And for those that might not be familiar in tech, especially when you're in, you know, developing mobile apps or you're thinking about user experiences, there's two aspects that you're usually thinking about. There's more to me, but the two wide knowns are like UI and UX. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard like UI, UX. So UI stands for like user interfaces. How is the app actually going to feel? And UX is more about how are users going to feel when they experience this app. And I think just coming from like millennial Gen Z generation, there's not a lot of us that understand that. And oftentimes we're caught in the usability of technology. We're only using it, right? But I love your approach of looking at technology from a consumer standpoint of using, but how about we also talk about how the things should be used, you know, and I thought that was so important. So I remember like after we first like talked, and I think like I had actually like DM'd you like, yo, like, and you were in LA, and I was like, yo, check out these books, and we were just like vibing, and what I really loved was just this parallel connection in terms of how we understand the culture and how we understand the technology, fusing those two together. To really just elevate the culture in a completely different space, right? It's like, what does like, in design, I used to like admire Bauhaus a lot, and Bauhaus is like an element of design that, you know, came from like Germany and stuff like that. But I'm like, man, what about Black House? What about like people of, where's our design aesthetics in that? So like, I really, I guess that's like how we met, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stuck out during that time and during those conversations was that we both cared about and incorporated nature itself to technology, which I think is like not common at all. And what I'm hoping to
I'll be right back. Like legit looking for the
yeah, because basically when we met up, we were talking about just like how, so one of the things I'm passionate about, and just for the folks who don't know me, I'm a tech anthropologist. My name is Alex Wolf. And so I talk and I consult about
but let's all listen to you.
The ways that technology impacts and changes society, economics, and just culture in general. And so one of the things that I feel is really important for us to think about when we're inventing new technology is seeing the universe as one big organism and not something to build tech on top of, but to build tech with. Because a lot of the harmful technology we build is under the impression that almost like nature is an enemy. So it was, again, super refreshing to talk to someone who's also thinking about architecture and technology with incorporating that nature. So anyway, it's rare.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing. And it's like we're both Black. So it's like
no, I would even add to the, you know, the fact that you know, sustainability has been a very huge thing for me, and like I think about the next generation of like kids, right? And I mean, you remember, like, I remember being young and like seeing like Mark Zuckerberg on TV when he was like 19, you know, talking about like how he created this social media app and this, that, and the third. But this generation, and by this generation, I'm saying like millennial, Gen Z generation, they haven't had a chance to build yet, right? We're all like consuming. We're all on TikTok. We're all on, you know, Triller. We're all on Instagram. We're all on Snapchat, Twitter. But a time will come where we'll be faced with the largest issues and we'll want to create. But if the tools that are there aren't, you know, are biased, we would only be contributing to enhancing and scaling those biases in itself. And I think, just like you just said, a huge part of my work is biomimicry, studying nature. And I think that's like what we like aligned on, how nature plays a huge space in how we should design systems.
Yeah,
and I feel sometimes like, like so many schools focus on research and development and don't actually include it in the curriculum of like at least studying nature, because nature has all the, you look at like neural networks are based on like, you know, how ants formulate and communicate with each other. So like 100%, that's such a like a good point. So like,
that's why it was funny, because we were able to geek out about literally like ants and plants and all that stuff and water. I remember we were talking about that as well. So that was, I'm very happy. I think since then we've definitely like been aligned, and you've been working on your projects and I've definitely been doing my stuff as well. But I think I wanted to make sure that we went over sort of like you explaining a little bit more about what a architectural technologist is, and then maybe I can talk a little bit more about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love you, the fact that you just said that. Somebody literally just asked. They said, I'm a Black architect student at SciArc, where I gave a lecture. I'm curious about the architect title that I carry. And for me, I think, like, conventionally, architecture is in the same vein of a doctor, right? So if you didn't actually go get that degree, like, you shouldn't be mentioning yourself in that space. But when I refer to myself as an architect, I never even wanted to convey that, hey, I'm about like building buildings and all of these things. It's more
Right.
so on a biomimicry anthropology level, right?
Right.
And architecture as a verb means the process. It's a process of creation. And so for me, like, fusing that process of creation directly infused with case studies done around the culture, right? How do people consume ideas, and how can we, well, how do people consume ideas, or even how do people filter out problems from solutions? And based on the problems that they're going through, how can we curate these solutions around them specifically? So my work is really just around like creating physical and digital systems. I guess you could say, like, my friend came up with this term where he says digital. It's like physical and digital. And it's really about just taking those experiences and making it into physical products that can benefit people of the culture, right? Because I think, like, something we had even talked about is we live in an era now that for every physical item that exists, there's a digital equivalent. And I think we talked about that. So our parents or our grandparents, like, probably have to use regular calculators. Now we have a phone that can do that. A pager,
Right.
like, is a new form of like a notification bar on your phone. When you get a notification, that's like a pager that tells you to go to another app. So I think, like, my work is really just around how do we, understanding that now we live in an age of, we live in a period where for every physical thing, there's a digital equivalent of that thing.
Right.
How do we take both of those things, right? And understand that 9 times out of 10, things that things that are in the physical space in terms of biasness, because we haven't changed anything, ultimately lead to digital biasness as well, right? So the fact that, like, a camera was based and things like white balance and all these things were created for people of lighter complexion, and now we have mostly digital cameras, those same biases will transfer over to the next one. So, I mean, we can get into that, but that's just like, for you as well as everyone in there, that's what digital architecture means to me, asking those big questions and, more importantly, providing solutions to those.
Yes, which is really fascinating work. And I think, again, it's important for people to see the dimensions of technology. It's it has more layers than just the engineering or just the marketing. There's so many other elements to it that I think we're just beginning to articulate and put, again, like, on the forefront. But yeah, I think that's really cool.
I know, 100%. So I mean, we briefly spoke like earlier on how we were going to, like, do this format. And I think, like, what was going to be the focus. I know you said I'll let you lead because, like,
Well, I guess what I want to make sure I get or share in my message is that as far as the tech anthropology side, when you were talking about digital thing or physical things having a digital equivalent, a lot of my work is about helping people sort of redefine or reconceptualize the nature of the internet in relation to how we use it. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that in addition to that, a lot of
Soleil, you see those comments from Soleil?
My whole thing is I'm really advocating for this idea that offline is it's a remnant term, and that we are now all sort of we're now in a mobile internet experience where we're logged on all the time. Not necessarily meaning we're on Instagram all the time, even though we are, but I think a lot of when we're building technology, the harmful technology comes from this idea that there is a place to log off. And it's a very millennial and Gen X sort of conceptualization, because when we got into the internet, that's how it was. You could log off. And so since a lot of the technology and the software is built under this impression even though it's no longer like that, even though it's not a stationary experience, it's a mobile experience, I find that's where a lot of the friction of the UX, UI, the user experience comes from. So I think that when I talk about technology and what it's birthed with at that same time, I use a similar analogy, but what I say is that every time technology is born, it has a fraternal twin, which is technique. So what we neglect when we invent technology is whatever effort or action we as the humans have to incorporate to make it work. And when we design technology to have the least possible technique that we can afford, we end up building a culture and a society that loses that type of natural wisdom and knowledge that brings us closer to nature. So I'm actually a little bit more of like, I think at first sight, people might look at me and think I'm more of an analog person.
Yeah.
And I might be, but I also...
No, she be tweeting, guys. She be tweeting.
But it's just like, I feel like I look at technology very differently. I see it way beyond just software and artificial intelligence. I see it as regular, basic, everyday things. And I'm really just passionate about getting people to be more sensitive to how a spoon is technology, a table is technology, every type of modification of nature is technology. And I say it a lot, but the reason why is because that conceptualizing it that way gives you a greater appreciation for how huge of a responsibility it plays, not just in your daily life, but in your culture, in your government, in your economics. And the reason why I care about tech anthropology is because we adopt technology really fastly without understanding how it's going to affect us or what societal consequences are going to come from it. And I think that's a huge threat to the foundation of a healthy community. And it's worth exploring the unintended consequences. It's worth exploring what technology obliterates the things that make us the most human. And I feel like millennials in particular are having to go back and reevaluate how much we've built.
You know, one thing, I was taking like mental notes as you were talking, and you know, I know how we said we were going to make this very conversation based. So I love that you just like gave me so much to you know, continue on. I really loved how at the beginning you said that, you know, as technology evolves, as technology grows, we must also consider the technique, right? And I think like I had been saying that in a very parallel way, as to say that like anyone that says tech bias is blinded. Like anyone that says tech bias is using it in a very not only unhealthy way, but in a way that can affect the people's perception of technology. Technology is never biased. The tool is never biased. The person who handles the tool is always biased, right? The techniques that are used on the tool is what's biased. So I really love how like you know, you just brought that up to invite people to understand, like, you know, when we think of modern day technology, especially from a mobile standpoint or a web standpoint, mostly a lot of consumer products, we should get into the habit of saying things more like algorithm bias, right? Code bias, technique bias, rather than technology bias. The technology just does its thing. On its own, it just does its thing, but it's what you choose to do with it and how you choose to build it, as well as how you choose to utilize it in your technique, that defines whether that use case of it is biasness or not. So I just thought I should mention that to everyone in here, because I think that's something we both, if not maybe even more people in this live stream here, tech bias, but it's more like algorithm bias, because we've seen time and time again how that technology can be used in a way to benefit people instead of crunch them.
Yes, I definitely agree that it's important to be specific about what type of technology. That's why I don't like to just throw social media into one bubble, because again, when we define it, we're thinking of like 2 to 3 apps when it could be like 1,000 different types of platforms. So it's not doing the word justice. I think there are some technologies that are, their design implies a certain type of use that can cause, I don't know if I would say bias, but like, for example, Instagram is kind of like set up so we feel like we have to post beautiful pictures all the time, where TikTok is like a safe space to post funny videos. And I do think that what you kind of expect your users to, how you expect them to interact will dictate or reflect the nature of what gets done on the platform. So for me, I think that the grid is probably like the least fun part of Instagram. Like obviously after stories came, that became sort of like the main juice of it, and like features like live. So I do think I think it's half-half. Like, I think that, of course, we want to burden the user with responsibility, but I see so much technology being built. And I think when you're thinking about, like, civilization and what's the most civilized thing to do, you have to also consider what people are going to be likely to do. I think about the hood, right? Like, it's like people say that about the hood, like, oh, well, you know, you should just be able to, like, suck it up and make it happen. But it's like, if there's a whole system in place that has these like restrictions and systematic ways of oppressing people, then it's not so much there is like, okay, yeah, the person can be just a hardworking person and get out of the hood and blah, blah, blah. But I do think we also have to be sensitive to how the way we design creates bias as well. So
I think, you know, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And, you know, earlier we briefly spoke about like D-Nice, right? And like, you know, being able to bring in so many people and a conglomerate of so many different people into one stream. And we were like discussing how, you know, what would have happened if the platform had been built for that, or, you know, to support him better. Because I know, like, you know, he was in there, and I see some other people like doing like physical experiences using IG Live and being like, hey, cash at me. So the not only the non-convenience, but the user feasibility ratio of somebody being like, oh, I have to leave this app and come back and have it reload again, and I'll miss some time. You know, so it's very interesting how one thing that I've realized through this period, especially as people of color, is how people have stayed optimistic and very creative. Even though we all know, like, majority of these businesses and majority of the way that these apps are inherently biased, sometimes out of pure ignorance that the creators aren't informed to know, and sometimes on purpose. Like, I was reading an article on TikTok the other day, and it said that, I think, like, it was like and don't quote me on this, but it said something about how the creators or something, they prioritize content that they would like to see on the platform. It was like a big thing the other day, but I love how, you know, we just as the people are so resilient. And so I'm like, sometimes I'm like, damn, like if we actually had the codes on how these technologies worked, you know, I could only imagine what we can create. And that's why, despite everything going on right now, I think this is going to be the best period for innovation and true creativity. Inventions in this day and age will separate from innovations. Anyone can be inventive, right? I once read that being an inventor is simply, all it requires to be an inventor is create something that serves you. But innovation is about creating whatever it is to serve a multitude of users and also serve them in a way that benefits them, right? So I don't even think as founders we should be like, wow, we made the next this. Well, if we made the next this and it's only influencing or helping a specific demographic, then do we truly are we, you know, is it truly like the next? Or maybe it's just curated next more than, you know, absolute next. We have very subjective ways of coding, subjective ways of prioritizing what features go into apps. And I think it's now time that like even the general public is let in on these conversations. It's like, and I've consulted for so many different companies to know that like, you know, there's focus groups, and sometimes those focus groups, diversity isn't just about the color of your skin. It's about what you go through, where you come from, you know, what priorities do you have? How do you get your, like so many different things. So I think that's so important for us to touch on.
Yeah, I definitely,
this is such a quantum conversation, by the way.
Well, I was going to say, I agree that it's one of the best times to be creators, because I think in addition to the shift that you're talking about, I think that whoever's providing quality content, education, or entertainment online is going to start to see how much power they have as far as without or throughout the technological landscape. Because one of the things I keep saying is that all the tech people took the cultural capital money in the early 2000s. Like, this is when everything went to digital. This is when everyone went to YouTube. People left cable. People went to Netflix. People stopped buying CDs. They went to, they went to iTunes. And so the value of cultural capital has not gone down. If anything, it's amplified. It's more fringe. People are even, I think, closely attached to whatever cultural assets that they're interested in, music, film, art. And I do think that now it's going to be the people who are responsible for the cultural capital to take over the tech space, because they're going to see, hey, we control the audiences on here. We make platforms like Instagram and Twitter profitable in the first place, because if we weren't providing the programming every day through what we post, this wouldn't work. So I think that, yeah. Go ahead.
No, if I could add to that, I strongly feel like this should be one, we've never gone through such an economic shift in history, period, and especially with everything that's going on right now. But I fundamentally believe that this time period, when all of it is done, and everything, quote unquote, goes back to normal, whatever that means is subjective. I feel like schools, especially if you're in marketing, business econ, or even like anthropology or whatever you're into, I feel like this period should be a case study, right? Because I think about like what D Nice was able to do. That is a case study in itself, right? Because understanding of the people, understanding of the technology, because he's also a nerd that understands technology, and creating an ecosystem where you literally have pretty much, if it wasn't the influential person, one of the most influential people in the chat, it was like a 2 degrees of separation and everybody was there. So I think when we even in the past, and both of us have done it, said hey guys, we need to understand that we make these platforms what they are. We are literally their stock. Like literally, they lose 10 million followers, their stock goes down. Every single one of us is a digital currency that's converted, that adds value to these businesses. And I think with what the format that people are using now, we're realizing oh, okay, we thought it was all good because we get to make Instagram accounts or Twitter accounts or Snapchat accounts, and we don't pay for data. We can store as much information as possible. We can communicate with everybody. We should be lucky to be on these platforms. But now we're realizing oh, okay. Okay.
A lot of information for very little in return, as far as owning digital assets. It's they give you access to communicate to a portion of your audience they feel comfortable letting you communicate to. And I just think I'm so pro internet, and my dad always taught me to own your own domain name. He wasn't into real estate, but he was definitely he's into digital real estate. So he's own your own domain name, have your own email address. And he taught me the importance of seeing the internet as raw turf. It's your raw land where you can actually have ownership throughout it. And I do think that we kind of forgot that underneath these layers, the software is this raw internet that you can use to build really powerful communities. It's a very powerful network. And I think we forget that because we get sucked into, a third-party platform. So I think it's going to shift.
Oh, no, 1,000. If it already isn't, because, they hardware is hard. That's why a lot of people don't do it. But I think we're really starting to realize is at the core of what drives all these things is empathy, emotion, human beings that are behind and using these platforms, right? Because it's that's why when sometimes you do weigh the pros and cons. One thing that I've been thinking about recently is wow, social media was already contributing to a lot of children being addicted, the dopamine rush, depression, and all of these things. And now, because of the way that the system has been structured, in a way that social media, not necessarily social media balance or social media laws, have been I just think in politics, right? There haven't been any form of everybody just saying social distancing. But what does social distancing mean? And does that also mean, social distancing from a software standpoint, a UX standpoint, where we look at ourselves and we also say, hey, now's the time where we all go through our feeds and we filter and say, hey, I should only be following these people that add to the value of me during this period. I feel especially when we think of government, when we think of just cities. There's not a focus on that. And I think that's why our message is so important, to show like, hey, like the reason why people don't want, the government and everything involved with like technology is because historically what that has meant, right? But if you found like a new age of individuals that were working directly with large scale to small scale businesses, right, that could come in and be like, hey guys, all right, cool, we get it. You built the social media platform and it's super dope. No one's taking away from your creativity and geniusness of creating that. But in 2 to 3 years, these are the metrics we should be looking at, right? And I think we don't have that because it happened with oil. Exxon and a lot of companies, they knew what the long-term effects of that in 10 to 15 to 20 years. They knew all of that. So in the same way, I can say with artificial intelligence systems, simulations that companies are able to run, data scientists literally studying what gesture interactions people love the most. Oh, you know what? Yeah, all right, we're going to do a swipe interface like in our app, or we're going to do a tap interface in our app. And I remember having this conversation with Kanye about this, about like how like Angry Birds, swipe gestures, and all those things are connected in terms of like scientists aggregating data, seeing what gestures are most preferred, and designing things around that. Like, you ever notice, like, when you go on Instagram, and anybody in this might relate to this. Have you ever gone on, when you went to, like, your profile and you were scrolling, and you accidentally followed somebody?
I've definitely
didn't know? No?
Yeah.
You know, like when you're scrolling through, like, your likes, and then the follow button comes up, it was strategically placed at a specific angle that it knows most people are not ambidextrous, and most people are not left-handed. Majority of people are right-handed. So let's put this button right above.
Yeah, that's like, I feel like on
they're gonna shut our Instagram live down.
I know. It's funny because I feel like the people at Instagram love these conversations the most. No, but I feel like Twitter is like that. The promoted tweets are always a little stickier.
Yeah.
Than the regular tweets. I'm like, I did not apply more pressure to this than I would have normally, but somehow this ad opened. I can sense those like little nuanced design or those features a lot when I'm using social media and stuff.
I know we also said that we would be taking some questions. So do you think like we should?
We should.
Should we both wait? Are you able to see them?
I don't see the Q&A thing. Do you?
I do.
It would be on your end, I think.
Okay, all right. So far. Okay, all right. So.
This question's coming in?
Yes, the number one question that is coming in is about 5G. Okay, like everybody's asking about 5G, and I don't know if we should answer that because again, too, like I feel like. Do you
have anything to add to that?
I do, but I think it's not as easy as a yes or a no, or like I think that it's just so complicated that. Soleil wants to know. Wait, can you see the comments? Do you see them?
I do see some of them.
If her baby hairs have power in them,
yes, they do. Absolutely.
No, okay, all right. Let's see. I guess we can. All right. I think there's a question that said, how do you think the tech space will change based on the pandemic where that's happening right now? I think we've already kind of like answered that. Let's see. Wow.
Hi, Alexis.
Okay. For someone working on it, no, I think that's like the same one. Okay. All right. Let's go. Because a lot of questions are the same thing. How do you think COVID-19 will change the tech space? I
think it's changing the non-tech space more than it's changing the tech space. Because I feel like I don't know if you were following Iddris in February on Twitter, but he was posting these like really fear-mongering tweets anticipating this pandemic. He would just like post like a picture of someone like washing their hands, and he'd be like public service announcement. And they're like really creepy. But when you think about like the head honchos in tech, they're anticipating stuff like this. A lot of the software, a lot of what Microsoft is working on and the VR experiences are about creating more and more social experiences through technology. So, and if you pay attention to who's thriving at this time, it is Instagram, it is Zoom, it is, all the software companies that provide the ability to communicate to each other. I think who's feeling the hit the worst, obviously, are people who are responsible for throwing events and having to figure out how do you fit in an economy that doesn't have that room for that type of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's really about, like, this period should really, if anything, it should show, like, tech companies or anyone in the tech space the importance of connecting with your audience, and not just in a digital format that you create for them to connect with each other, but you're equally as responsible for connecting with them in itself, right? And I've been saying this for a very, very, very long time. I absolutely feel, and it's okay to feature creep, right? It's like, you don't have to give all the users all you want in your app. That's how Facebook got to where it's at, because there's too much things to do in it. But I do think that there should be, like, community posts, even if it's UI elements of the apps, right? That consumers or users are able to vote on, right? Hey, do you think we should have an edit button, right? Because it's like on Twitter, for example, it's not necessarily about somebody going in and, not tweeting something. It's about the inconvenience that brings on a multi-dimensional scale and level. So I think it's really going to be about people working directly. And I remember telling you earlier that although we haven't disclosed too much, like, the partnership with Facebook for me is one of those ways that, like, I look at how this space will be transformed, and to be, like, one of the only people that has a collaboration with Facebook and having to fight for that. Like, I remember them at first, we had to talk to 20 different legal teams because they were like, we don't collaborate with people.
I believe it.
But I'm like, yeah, I mean, you would know too, because, yeah, I know. It's like, but working hand in hand to deliver these experiences, I think, is what's most needed, right? The tech companies working with influencers that have large groups of followers or a high engagement rate, and saying, hey, what do you think about this? What should we do about this? And in that vein, like, I'm working with Instagram right now on something called Facebook IQ. I can't say too much about it, but it's going to be a learning platform on Instagram, literally like a whole platform within Instagram where you can.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, you get, like, points and credits. So I think, like, when I think of how this period is going to shift, I think it's going to humble a lot of tech companies, right? And going to cause a very, 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 very balanced and healthy relationship from a user all the way down to a creator, right? Or from a creator to a user. So, I mean, that's what I think about it. Should we,
I think also the last thing I would add to answer that question is that we're going to, I know Iddris and I know Teal really want biotech to be prioritized, and it hasn't because of all the red tape, because they're really about investing in the technology that's going to help us make us more immune to threats like this. And I think they're going to use this as a case study of, like, this is why you should have invested in biotech before. Like, they have a bunch of companies that they're ready to expand, but the government is like, ah!
We just had another, I absolutely agree. We just had another question that says, what would be your advice for a student who wants to delve into tech and wants to be a creator in the long term? Okay, you just spoke, so maybe I should go.
Go ahead.
I think focusing on, I remember doing a TED talk about 2 years ago, and the main point or the main objective or the main message or truth I was giving in that TED talk was how creatives coming into this space should focus more on the necessity of things rather than the aspiration of things. What this period has shown us the most is how much we've taken for granted and not even noticed how the market is saturated with aspirational things. Now, that might be a TV show that literally doesn't affect you and you don't learn about, all the way to a physical thing that you used to do that right now you can't, but you're realizing how much you don't need that thing. Right. So in that vein, I think for students who are going into tech, it's not about learn Java and learn C# or whatever, because truly it doesn't really matter what language you know. What really matters is I'll borrow from Alex with this, the technicalities behind it, right? How good are you at problem solving? How good are you at assimilating? Because as we start to move into, I mean, we're still creating weak AI, but services now literally being converted to a digital footprint. And by digital footprint, I mean every physical business can now be converted into a digital footprint. Whether you're a restaurant to a hair salon, you know, what do they call those? Like a hair salon place. Everything from your customers coming in to how much the average customer spends to how much time the average customer spends, you know, getting their nails done, all the way down to how long it takes to finish. All those things can be aggregated into data now. So for a creator in this space, think about businesses that are essentials. Split technology into two spaces, right? Because tech is a tool, essential tools and non-essential tools, and focus mostly on the essential tools. And just from a logical, pragmatic standpoint, focusing on those technical, necessity-based tools or essential tools will not only put you in a better position in the long run, but will put you in a better financial situation. So, I mean, that's what I would say to that. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I think that the part I'll add is for the creator part. So again, I think the big shift for creators is them realizing that this idea of needing 1 million followers to make pennies to have ad share and ad spend is not that wise, and it's not. There's so many more innovative ways that you can create an income for yourself and actually build a community, an online community through selling your own merchandise. I think ownership is going to really, really peak in this year and next year for creators. And that's what I would say is please don't do the typical don't neglect the business parts of what it takes to be a creator until the last minute. You can start investing in that stuff now. That's what I would add.
I like this question. It's actually to you, Alex. Can you speak on the benefits of gamification when it comes to user experiences? I'm so excited for this answer.
Okay. Well, I feel the best example, people give Snap a lot of crap for their streaks feature. So it's a gamification feature where basically both parties are incentivized to make contact at least once a day to accumulate a streak. And so a lot of people are really heavily invested in making sure the streak doesn't break. So people can look at that and be like, ew, that's gamification. It's just as bad as likes. It's just as bad as all the irrelevant notifications you get. But in my opinion, it's Snap trying to incentivize you to have daily communication with someone you're friends with. So there are ways to create gamification in a way that's nurturing a relationship in a healthy way. The other way they do this is with the Bitmoji. They have a Bitmoji comic series, and they'll send you a comic series of you as a Bitmoji interacting with your friends. And if you're not interacting with your friends on Snap, you'll have these lonely, sad Bitmoji strips, and they'll make you really want to contact your friends again. So that's just those are examples of benefits of how you can do it. It's just a matter of are you highlighting why it's important to communicate in a certain way to certain people. Whereas I feel on Instagram I gotta post a certain type of picture, and then that gets the the likes and the attention. And I know a lot of people, especially creators, they feel I wish people liked the substance stuff more. But sometimes with substance, if it's words, if it's something that's not hyper visual and sensationalized, it might not perform as well on Instagram's algorithm. So
yeah, I love that. And I think gamification is something that we've even been at Spatial Labs doing a lot of stuff that we'll launch later this year around. But I really love how gamified gives you a different level of aggregated data, and you can use that data to do a lot of real cool things. And I think for traditional businesses that are now getting into technology that might not understand the concepts of gamification, gamification is really just giving your users or your base that uses your service incentives to want to get on, right? By adding elements of game. So it can be anything from slot machines all the way to interactive things beacons that you have to click. And I think the one thing I love about gamification is it kind of humanizes technology in a way that for example, what we see with Bitmoji and how that's become a thing. When Apple first launched Bitmoji, and you can make your own avatar,
right?
It allows the software to behave in a very human way.
Emotional,
emotional, and in a way that you don't feel like you're talking to, or you're just using. You feel like you're using something that's living and breathing. So I would add that to the data collection that can be used to personalized experiences for users is also very important with gamification. I mean, of course, there's negatives to it as well, but
right. It all depends on what the goal is, right?
Yeah.
Like if your goal is just to get people to stare at a screen for as long as possible, then that's going to have a different, type of gamification than, oh, our goal is to connect people, or So it depends on what the higher goal is.
Cool. Let's see what else we got in here. Do you want to? Because I know we have 15 minutes. Was there something in particular that you might have thought was also important that we discuss?
I feel good. If you want to, maybe we'll do like one or two more questions.
Okay, cool. Let's love this. We're getting so many questions.
I can't imagine what you're seeing right now.
Okay, how about this one? When launching because I recently saw you say something about a friend of yours that used social media to like sell out all her books, right? When launching a business, how do you grow a following through social media?
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot. So I actually have a online education platform for creatives called Creative Business School. You can follow it on Instagram after this. And basically the point of it is to anticipate this shift I keep mentioning of creators realizing, hey, I don't need to burn myself out and make a bunch of content no one's going to watch to maybe get some, ad money. And instead saying, hey, do you know that with the 500 people who follow you or the 5,000 people who follow you, you can create a really thriving online community and merchandise it with your own stuff. I really do believe that's going to be the wave of the future. So if you're trying to grow a following through social media, the first thing that I think is really important is making sure that you are creating an identity or affirming an existing identity for the people who you'd like to serve. So especially social media is all about community. It's about figuring out how you want to be perceived. That's what we're all masters of doing on Instagram and Twitter. And that's very important for us as individuals, specifically in this time in our economy where the commodity markets are saturated. Commodity markets are markets where your basic needs are being met. And so now we're in this like desired market where most people have what they need basically. And so now we're making purchase decisions based off our desires and our wants. And that type of buyer psychology is linked to our identity. So start with an identity and get people excited, affirm that identity through your social media. And over time, if it's shareable, if it's likable, it grows organically and it becomes your own little internet world. That's what my first company was. I sold my first company when I was 25. It was completely based off of identity. So yeah.
So fire. So we have like 12 minutes. I love you even just talking about that because I think
what do you think about that? I'm very curious. Do you feel like that shift is happening as well?
No, 100%. I also think that what was the question structured on? Because I was like looking at
how to grow social media following. But I was saying, do you think creators are going to stop like that like traditional model of trying to? Because I feel like creators are going to just start selling their own stuff more.
Yeah.
Versus.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing that's always surprising to me about social media is, although it's social, it's limited, right? Meaning, you can only share your information with others based on the capacities of what the social media tool allows you to. Mm-hmm. So I think like we're going to see like a very, very interesting shift. And I think what I've done, what I've seen has been successful to me is like only aligning with things with my brand, so yeah. Even if it's from a perspective of outside of social media, like companies hit us up all the time and like, yo, hey, do you want to do this and this and this and this and this? And then I'm like, well, I don't smoke, so I'm not going to do like, personally, like I'm not going to do like a, advertising for a cannabis company. I don't drink. I love you, Diddy, but I'm not going to do, you know what I mean? But right. Like, I think it's all about authenticity. If you want to grow organically, you can't be putting all these growth. It's like a seed. If you want it to grow organically and have organic oranges or organic tomatoes or whatever, you can't be putting all these different steroids to it and expecting it to, and these insecticides and expect it to come a certain way. So I think just be authentic and to communicate with your followers. I think there's not an emphasis on that. Communicate. Like I used to do Instagram lives all the time, just connecting with people and letting them know like, I am here for you. I am here on behalf of you. And that's what I've realized has been successful. Now, if you're a new brand, I think sometimes what confuses brands is like, oh, we're so great at digital online sales. Oh, we'll be so great at Instagram sales or this sales. It's like, no, you can't just retrofit it and expect it to work.
Right.
You might be doing millions of dollars in products online, but that might not match on Instagram because it's a whole different audience. And majority of the time, it's a 60-second thing. So it's like you have a total of 60 seconds, but you have 15 seconds for me to decide if I want to watch the rest of your 45 seconds. So there's different approaches that need to happen. And even like when you're creating content, you create content to scale, right? A video that you post on Instagram might be a completely different aspect ratio and resolution for Twitter and for Snapchat. And those small things that going back and editing for different layouts, they go so far.
Right.
And really people will engage way more with your content when you do things like that. So I would say like being organic, and two, optimizing and creating content for each of the social media platforms that you want to grow your base on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's those little things that make creators so special, because we put so much effort and energy in making sure they're optimized and making sure our stuff looks good on all the different platforms. So I feel like that if you're going to put that much effort into something, you might as well build a back end system, because I feel like with Instagram you see, or with social media, you see the forefront. You see the forefront of what everyone's doing, but we don't understand there's a whole, in order for it to be financially like stable, there has to be a back end system, and that's what we're not seeing. So yeah, I'm excited for
I saw one question in the comment that I really liked. It says, Alex, what is your biggest advantage that helps you keep tabs on trends that allow you to predict so well? She's a human computer, guys.
Yeah, right. My biggest advantage is having a father who's an early adopter. That's really my biggest advantage, because I think, and that's why it's so important to invest in children and to spark their curiosity for technology at a young age, particularly Black girls and Black boys. How do we, that's why I think I'm sensitive to trends. That's why I think I'm sensitive to, what's happening in technology. And it is really beneficial for me because people literally pay me to predict things. And so it's gotten to a point where I'm that accurate. And I know it's because my dad very much was aggressive about making sure I was technically literate and that I could use computers and software and stuff like that and have my own domain and stuff like that. So I think that's my advantage.
That's so fire. Man, like you're more established in that space than I am. But I think like for me, I mean, I read honestly, my secret is reading, like, just reading and staying up to date. And it doesn't have to be a physical book that you feel like you need to buy, but like every morning I wake up, first thing I do is meditate for like at least 45 to an hour. And then I'll go on Engadget, TechCrunch, Apple News, and just learn so much, because you need to be, it's a huge disservice when you're not reading only because of this one thing. It's not that information is needed. It's that information that you've learned is already information of the past. Mm-hmm. Real-time information is already past time, right? Like, even if we're informing something like, did you see this happen on this? Like, the moment that I just said it, it's already happened. And they say like, we're going to go into a period where from 2020 to about 2026 or 7, the average shelf life for technology will be less than 6 weeks. So every 6 weeks, there'll be a new thing. And that's what we're seeing now with like transistors, the efficiency of transistors being able to be smaller and smaller. So our phones are getting lighter, our phones are getting smarter and consuming less power. But we're also seeing like, there was a time where like Apple released a phone every like 2 years, and now it's like every season. It's like the new, it's like a fashion. So I think like for me, always just reading and being up to speed with that. Like you just need to know what's going on around you.
So important. Yeah, and some people are like, what do you do if you don't have a supportive dad? And I'm just being honest about answering that question. But if you don't have that type of Yeah, if you don't have that type of support, obviously you can empower yourself through, like you said, reading, doing your research, make yourself fascinated about this stuff. That all of that is possible. So yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left. Do you want to take one more question, or do you have any closing remarks? Or any, I say closing remarks like this is a gala. It's like, closing remarks.
Is there another good question? Let's do one question. Let's do one more question and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
Pick a good ending one, like a good.
Yeah, like I'm looking through.
Okay.
Okay. Wow. How about this one?
That's a good one for you.
Okay. How long do you think it will be before? Oh, all right. How long do you think it will be before companies and schools become completely virtual or remote? I think this shift of what's happening right now is going to be a very integral part for that shift. I think the state that we live in with technology is we're so used to finding platforms for everything instead of creating ones. And I think this period right now, again, like the reason why I said earlier that I think more creatives and more creators needs to work with privatized institutions or schools or government institutions is because of this very thing.
Right.
When this had happened, there was no form of infrastructure, even if it was like a, Area 51, like hidden media platform or something like that for teachers to continue. And before this happened, I had some meetings with a couple of tech companies about building an infrastructure for not only homeschooling, but through AI that's like predictive and stuff like that. But I think, I don't know. I wouldn't even pretend to know. I think that's one of the things I love about myself is when I don't know something, I don't know. I don't try and sound smart. I do not know at all. But what I will say is that this period is going to force more people, especially at not only in privatized, companies, but in government organizations, nonprofit organizations, to start thinking about, making sure next time that we have that safety net, we have a system where students will not really be impacted as much about things like that, and technology being that bridge. So, what about you?
I agree. I think times like we're in now are going to show how much geography is not as important as it used to be, and that people will unify based on their ability to connect remotely. And that's going to be that. I think that's going to happen with our schools. I think it might even happen with governments. Down the line, we'll start to form actual communities, not based off of the geography of things, but through the online networks. So,
and if I could just add like a quick thing, I know we have 1 minute, but I also think on that point, I don't think virtual schools as they currently exist are the right thing, because I went to a public school, and being at a public school, I didn't get enough attention from teachers to be able to guide me in the right space. So how much more like a computer? So we have to like do it differently. I know we got like 30 seconds left.
We got 30 seconds. This
has
been wonderful.
Thank you all.
We're gonna do this in real life.
The amazing Alex Wolf for bringing this harmony together, because we wanted to do something in person at the Soul House, and we couldn't because of like
we still will. Yeah, when things die down, we'll get back to it. But yeah, I had a great time.
Me too. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to just connecting the vibe with all y'all.
Awesome.
Okay, bye. I'm gonna save this to my story and send it to you, right?
All right.
Okay. Bye, guys. Ooh.